everyone. It's Chloe Archer here again with a new episode of Tea, Tentacles, and Talk, cozy conversations about LGBTQ plus romance. Before we get into my interview for this month, I wanted to give a couple of updates on me and my stuff. I just had my book in the Tales from the Tarot series come out called A Highland Gargoyle's Lucky Star. And this features the Darkwing Gargoyle clan in Scotland. You learned a little bit about them in my Monsters Hollow series. In book two, The Gargoyle and the Romance Writer, Vash's brother Elric lives with the clan in Scotland, and this is his book. Sorry, my dog is playing in the background. And I have a new Christmas audio coming out very soon, any day now. All I Want for Christmas is Tentacles. My book from last year is coming out in audio any day now, and it's narrated by the fabulous Greg Boudreau. And you guys, it's a real treat. You're gonna love it. Similarly, I hired Greg to narrate my Tentacular Tales Christmas novella, A Very Tentacular Christmas. This takes place between books one and two. Many fans of the series have read this little novella before, but I hesitated putting it into audio for a while for a variety of reasons, but now I have done it and it will be available for exclusive purchase on my web store very, very soon. So if you're not already on my newsletter, I recommend getting on that so you can get the latest info about when that will be available, because that will be the only place to get it is on my web store. Similarly, Joel Leslie is starting recording Siren in the Rain for me. Originally, he was going to be narrating in May of 2025, but he had a last minute opening in his schedule. And so he's going to start this month. And I'm hoping that we will have it available for sale on Audible in December. I apologize. My dog is very feisty right now. Um, and then last but not least, Greg has finished narrating The Gargoyle and the Romance Writer. The pre-order for that is going to be going up, I've been told, in December. However, Podium is not going to release it until early May. I'm not really sure why they're doing such a long pre-order, but that's their right since they purchased my copyright for that. So I'll keep you posted on when that's going to be available, but you should be able to pre-order next month. Anyway, that's the updates from me. Without further ado, let's get on to the interview. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Tea, Tentacles, and Talk, cozy conversations about LGBTQ plus romance. I'm your host, Chloe Archer, and today I am here with my guest, Amy Aislin. Let me introduce Amy to you all. Amy's lived with her head in the clouds since she first picked up a book as a child. I can relate. And being fluent in two languages means she's read a lot of books. She first picked up a pen on a rainy day in fourth grade when her class had to stay inside for recess. Tales of treasure hunts with her classmates eventually morphed into love stories between men, and she's been writing ever since. She writes evenings and weekends or whenever she isn't at her full-time day job, saving the planet at Canada's largest environmental nonprofit. Very cool. An unapologetic introvert, Amy reads too much and socializes too little with no regrets. She loves connecting with readers, and feel free to join her Facebook group, Amy Aislin's Readers, to stay up to date on her upcoming releases and for access to early teasers. She is also on Instagram, and you can also sign up for her newsletter. Welcome to the show, Amy. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So Amy and I met not too long ago at the Rainbow Romance Readers Retreat
Yes.
in Toronto, which was really cool. And I asked her if she'd like to come on the show. And so here we are, serendipity. Um, So, because this is tea, tentacles, and talk, I often encourage my guests to bring a beverage with them if you've got one. I today I have some very nice ginger honey lemon tea. Uh, Trying to, I'm middle aged now, and oh, I need something good for my gut today.
That sounds delicious.
It's nice. Yeah. Did you bring something with you?
I have my water,
Oh,
not
hydration.
super fancy. I had my tea. I'm a tea drinker as well, but I had it earlier today. So my drink of choice in the evening is water.
Water. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. Well, hydration is important always, so that's good. Well, Amy, I'd love to get started by talking a little bit about writing and how you got involved in this. So, can you tell me a little bit about sort of your journey? When did you know you wanted to write, and when did you discover you were good at it?
Um, I guess I've always known that I wanted to write. Like you mentioned, I wrote my first little short story during recess because we were rained out, and it was literally an adventure story of me and my friends going on a treasure hunt.
Nice.
And then I just sort of kept writing after that, little short stories. I actually, a few years ago, we had to clean out my parents' basement, and I found a stack of some short stories I had written when I was
Oh,
like
cool.
9, 10, 11, 12. One of them was laminated, and I was like, I don't remember doing this at all. But kept writing. High school and university didn't write at all. It was busy. I was socializing, making friends, hanging out. And then in my early 20s, I moved to Ireland for a year.
Hmm.
Um, just because I wanted to. I had been to university for a couple of years. I didn't like my program, didn't like the university, didn't like anything about it. And I was like, I need a break. I'm going to go do something different. So I moved to Ireland for a year. And it was as I was there that for some reason stories started coming into my head. And I even considered this was way before everybody had a laptop. Well, I didn't
Okay.
have a laptop. I would go to a computer cafe, like an internet cafe, is
Oh,
what they
yeah,
called it,
yeah.
to email friends and family. But I considered getting a laptop just to start writing the stories, and I didn't because money was in short supply while I was there and I had to budget. But when I got home, I was there for a year, and when I got home is when the stories really started germinating in my head. And so I started taking some classes just at the local college in creative writing, like continuing education, like after school classes. But I didn't really start getting serious about it until 2015 when
Hmm.
I entered a contest. And the
Hmm.
goal of the contest was literally to finish and start a book within a set amount of time. And
Oh,
if you finished the book, you got put into a draw and you won a prize pack of copy editing, cover design, some promo, and a whole bunch of other stuff. The reason for that being that apparently only 2% of people who ever start writing a book actually finish writing
I
that book. And
yeah.
so I joined that contest, didn't win it, which was fine, but it was the first time I had actually written something from beginning to end. And
Right.
then the following year, I did the same contest and I actually won that time. I won that
Oh,
year. So I had
cool.
cover art, I had editing. I got a ticket to the RT convention that year that was part
Oh,
of
yeah.
like the prize package. I can't
Hmm.
remember what else, but that sort of prompted me to self-publish. Not my first book, but my first full-length novel. The first few before
Oh,
that had been novellas that I published through an indie press. So it was
hmm.
sort of the impetus for me to start self-publishing and putting books out there more regularly.
That's amazing. Now, did you start publishing in MM or were you
Yeah,
in? Okay, very cool.
yeah.
Um, I mean that's really fascinating. I also lived in the UK for a year. No, I lived in
Nice.
Scotland.
Okay.
So when I finished my undergrad degree, I decided I wanted to travel more and I applied to some graduate programs in other countries and I got into this 1 year master's program at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. And so I went
Oh,
there and
nice.
it was amazing. I would love to move back there someday.
Yeah, I was there in September. I was there in September for
Oh,
Rare, and
for
I spent a
rare?
couple of
Oh,
weeks in
nice.
Scotland, and we actually went to the University of Edinburgh just to
Oh,
browse
really?
around the campus and look around and see.
Yeah. Oh, very cool. Yeah, and Edinburgh is I mean, it's such a cool city.
Such a cool city.
It
Yes.
really is. Yeah, like I mean, I've been to a lot of places, but I really Scotland has a special place in
Yeah.
my heart. And I've been to the Highlands a whole bunch and,
I love Ireland.
some of the islands and stuff and yeah, so it's super cool. So, yeah, I mean, Rare Edinburgh, I'd love to go at some point when they have it in Edinburgh
Yeah.
again, but I'm
I
going
love
to London, the Rare
it.
London this coming summer. And I
Yeah.
saw on your website, are you going to Glow in Australia?
Yes,
Have you
I
been to
am. Yeah.
Australia before?
Yes, I was actually there last spring because for the first glow in
Oh,
2023.
really?
Yeah. Yeah, so
Oh,
last
very
April
cool.
2023. I was there for both Glow and Rare. Melbourne was the week after.
Oh,
So I was
wow.
there for both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I'd love to go
I love Australia.
someday. I
Yeah.
just, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to like pinch pennies and save so I can buy like a business class ticket because like
Oh,
now my
so
body is
expensive.
like I can't do coach no more for those long
Yeah. We
internet.
did coach, but we did the extra leg room.
Oh,
You have to pay
mm,
extra for them, but at least you can stretch out your legs and you're not cramped in this tiny little airplane
right. Oh
seat.
my
And it
gosh.
did help a lot.
Oh, good to know. Yeah. No, I'm just, I did a lot of that international travel in like basic coach for many years. That I hit my 40s and I was like, can't do this anymore. My body says no, 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 no.
Yeah.
No, that's really cool. Um, so, if you started writing in 2015, you've been doing this for a while. Kind of how has your brand as a writer in the genre evolved over time? Were you always doing contemporary? Did you always kind of have a sports romance focus, or has that kind of evolved over time?
It has evolved. I didn't start with sports. I started with just like your low angst
Mm.
or slow burn contemporary romances. And I still write low angst and I
Yeah.
still write slow burn and I still write contemporary. But the sports evolved from a previous book I had written. I had written a novella. It was actually the first book I think that I ever published.
Oh.
It was published through a small indie press, and it wasn't a sports novel.
Mm.
The one of the characters is a former hockey player,
Mm.
and in the book, I had referenced a couple other hockey players who were just meant to be side characters. And
Mm.
then, for whatever reason, a few months after I wrote and published that book, those two characters started talking to me in my head, and their stories sort of developed organically. And that
Mm.
launched my first hockey book,
Very,
which launched a 6 book series and then a couple of spin-offs. So
yeah.
it kind of happened organically. I didn't mean to fall into hockey romance. It just sort of happened based on one of the books that I wrote.
Maybe it's part Canadian destiny, or
I don't know.
I mean,
I do
were
love
you were
hockey.
you a born and bred hockey fan from an early age, or?
No,
Mm,
no, no. I mean, I've watched it. My dad is a Leafs fan, so I've watched
yeah.
it. It's been on in the house, but I
Huh.
wouldn't call myself a diehard hockey fan.
Interesting, interesting. So,
Yeah,
like, how do you kind of do research for the sports side of it then?
a lot of YouTube videos. Like a lot.
Oh,
Yeah,
YouTube has everything. I mean, it is a
yeah.
writer. I mean, like, what did people do? Like, what did
I
writers
don't know.
do before?
I
My God.
don't know.
I mean, I guess that's probably why, like, a lot of them could not rapid release, right? Or do
Maybe.
any of that kind of
Yeah,
stuff, right? But like, well, and I guess maybe some of the old school publishing houses, maybe you got like a research assistant or so, I don't know. But
I don't know either.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I
No,
don't,
we're lucky. We're very lucky with
yes, we
YouTube.
really are. Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, the number of things I Google or look for on
Yeah,
YouTube is like just astronomical. But
yeah,
yeah.
me too.
Um, So, do you sort of envision, in terms of like where you're going to be going in the future? Do you think you're going to continue hockey romance? Will you look at other sports, or do you have plans for like shifting in any other directions with kind of like low angst romance?
I do have a hockey trilogy that I plan on starting to write in 2025, so there will be some
Okay.
more hockey. Um, and then in my Stick Side series, there's 6 books currently. I always envisioned it as an 8 book series, so I do have 2 more books that I want to write in that series to round it out to 8. When I'll get to them is anybody's guess. It's not going to be next year. I don't know. So there is hockey in the future. There's probably some other stuff too that I'll release sort of in between all of that. Aside from that, I've always had this idea to do a paranormal trilogy.
Mm.
Um, but the world building scares me when it comes to fantasy and paranormal. So I'm like, you know what?
Mm.
I'm just gonna sit on this for a little while and come back to it when I feel more confident being able to world build this whole
Oh, I
new
love that
world.
part of it.
Honestly, that
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, well, if you're ever interested, talk with me. I had this crazy idea for like a paranormal hockey romance with like a hockey team that's all
Yeah.
paranormal creatures and like the whole like, but I don't do the sports stuff. So I was like,
Oh, okay.
oh, I don't know much beyond a stick and a puck, like
Yeah.
so. But, because I think there are lots of interesting ways that you can blend certain genres in that
Sure.
always intrigues me. Like, but I think like there haven't been a lot of people that have done that kind of stuff with at least with sports romance yet that I'm familiar with. But it's like that's what would get me to read
Mhm.
a sports romance was if you made it paranormal.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Because I'm not like, I just don't know anything about sports. I don't watch sports. So usually that's like not the thing that draws me in when I'm looking at a blur. But like the minute like a paranormal element or like a murder mystery or
Mhm.
something, something like that adds
Yeah,
into it,
like a
it's
little
like,
extra.
oh yeah, that's what'll
Yeah.
pull me in. So I think it's interesting like how you can kind of cross over different readerships and
Oh, for
stuff with
sure.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So, I mean, have you ever thought about like, also, like you told me your origin story was like action adventure. I mean, have you ever
Yeah.
thought about doing like an action adventure?
No, actually, I haven't.
Hmm.
Yeah, well,
I think
now I
you
am that you've
totally
mentioned it, but yeah, I'm thinking about it now, but no, no, I I love mystery and I love a good mystery. I don't know where to start with that. Like, do I
should.
start
Hmm.
backwards with who did it and then
Right.
plot out all the little clues? I don't know. I have no idea how to write a mystery. I leave that to the experts, but that
Yeah.
would be fun to write.
I feel like I've talked to a lot of people who do mystery, Gregory Ash and like some other folks, and
Mhm.
it really varies widely, kind of like how everybody just writes their own way, whatever works for them.
Yeah,
Some of the
yeah.
mystery writers, like I assumed, oh, they probably all have to be plotters, but I've discovered
Mhm.
quite a few of them who are like, I didn't know who the killer was until like 80
No kidding.
the book, right? Yeah. And I'm like,
Ooh,
what? And then they're like, yeah. And then I
wow.
just go back and like, sprinkle some crumbs here and there. And like, yeah. So everybody's different in how they do
Okay.
it, which is amazing, right? But
Yeah,
I feel like I would make some kind of fatal mistake somewhere because I'm more of a
yeah.
pantser a little bit. Like, I
Mhm.
usually know kind of how the book begins and how it ends, but like beyond that, so I don't know with the mystery, like if I had to know who the killer was right away, or like if it's some other
I
type
don't
of
know.
mystery or like the thief or whatever. But
Yeah.
I don't think I could probably do that. Or I wouldn't finish writing the book because once I knew I'd be like, oh, well, I already know the answer. So kind of like I'm not invested anymore.
Yeah. I don't care. I know now.
Hmm. Yeah, that would probably be like what would happen to me, but but speaking of research, in terms of we talked about YouTube and all of that kind of stuff, but sometimes we as authors also need to travel to do some research. You mentioned like living in Ireland, and I mean, I'd love
Mhm.
to hear if like that's ever going to inspire a story like setting or location. But have you ever had to take any specific types of research trips for anything that you've written?
Not had to, but I did take a trip to Vancouver in October of 2022, and
Hmm.
I have a I have a trilogy, a hockey trilogy set in Vancouver, BC.
Yeah.
And I ended up going there not for research, but the timing just happened to coincide with when I was writing the book. Completely
Yeah.
by accident. My friend and I were going to visit another friend
Mm.
around the same time that I was writing the book. So it was kind of a research trip, but it was never meant to be as one. It just was a happy coincidence. And as I was there, I got to sort of do a little bit of research, take in the local environments, go to different
Yeah.
places, and then use that and write that into the books. So
Oh, very
it was
cool.
super handy.
Yeah. Had you ever been to Vancouver before that?
Um, yes, I was born out there. I was born in a
Oh,
little town called White Rock, which is near Vancouver.
okay.
But we moved away before I was one, and I had never been back.
Oh,
It was
wow.
really the first
Okay.
time as an adult back.
Yes, I have a brother, a younger brother who lives in Vancouver.
Nice.
Um, yeah, I was actually born in Montreal, but we only lived
Oh,
there till
okay.
I was 4. So,
Oh,
I
yeah.
was one of those kids who like we moved every like 3, 4 years for my dad's
Oh,
job.
okay.
So, like lived all over the place, stuff like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I know Vancouver is really beautiful, and I
So
love
nice.
the coast. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of neat stuff. Like, did you see the steam clock downtown? The steam powered
Yes.
clock?
Yes.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I love Vancouver.
Yes. Well, and they also, well, okay. I don't know if they still have it, but the last time I was in Vancouver, which was quite a while ago now, they had a branch of a chain called Beard Papa. So I lived in Japan for a while, and like Beard Papa is this really like famous chain in Japan that specializes in just making cream puffs, right? So like they have
Oh,
like the cream puff shells and like they make them there, and then like when you are gonna order, like you can pick what kind of cream puff filling you want for it. And they'll often have like interesting like
oh,
green tea flavored or custard or
yeah.
the
Oh,
standard kind of stuff. And then like they'll fill it right there for you while you're
no
there. So
kidding.
you get it like fresh. Anyway, they're so good. But like there
Oh,
aren't
that's awesome.
many of them in North America. So like a handful
I've
of
never heard of it.
cities have them. So Vancouver has one, New York has one. Those are the two places I've seen them that have them in North America, but it's a Japanese place. But yeah. So
Really
anyway,
awesome.
that's just a weird tangent, but I immediately thought of it when I was thinking of Vancouver.
Yeah.
Um, so since you've been writing for a while, and I'm like a newer author in terms of being published and in the genre and everything. I just had my 2 year anniversary in September, so I'm always
Oh,
really interested
congrats.
in talking to other people about, what kind of advice do you have? Like, what do you think for you has been a key to making a writing career, whether it's a side career or a main career, as something sustainable for you over the long term? Because it's obviously very easy to get burned out. There are ups and downs in the market. There's all kinds of things that can make it challenging to keep at it for a long period of time. So do you have any advice based on your own experience? What have you found that works for you?
Well, I work full time, so I do my writing on the evenings and weekends,
Yeah.
when I can find the time for it. So it's been, I'm gonna be honest, pre-COVID, when I was still commuting to work, was
Yeah.
actually a little bit easier because I would be at work and then I would commute home, but I was on the train. I take the subway to the train station, take the take the train out to the suburbs. And that was an hour and a half commute. So I had like an hour and a half on my commute to just decompress and read a
Yeah.
book on the train or listen to an audiobook or nap if I even wanted to, which I did frequently. And then
Yeah.
when I got home, I would have dinner and I would sit down and I would do my writing for the evening.
Mm.
Now I work from home and it's really hard to leave my computer at the end of a workday and go straight to writing on a
Yeah.
different computer right after. So one of the things that I really struggled with when I started working from home full time when COVID hit was how do I decompress before getting to the writing after a work day? Like, what does that look like when you're just going from one screen to another screen?
Uh,
So, for me, one of the biggest things has been taking that break, making sure that once I've done with the workday, the computer shuts off. I go and eat something for dinner and I don't write as I'm eating. Like I'm taking a break. I'm talking to
yeah.
other people in the house, not hermiting myself. I'm sort of disconnecting from both jobs
Mm-hmm.
before I get to the other one. So that was a big one for me. But then less on a day-to-day basis and more overall, I guess I don't know. I guess the main tip I would have would be take the time for yourself if you need it. Like you said, there is burnout. It's a
Yeah.
thing. Uh, I've dealt with it. A lot of other people have dealt with it, and it's really hard to feel like you're not accomplishing anything when you're in that burnout. But at the same time, you're like focusing on yourself and trying to get through that burnout. So it's not like you're doing nothing
Mm-hmm.
while you're in burnout or
Yeah.
whatnot. So, I guess I would say like take the time for yourself. Don't stress. Really take care of yourself and your mental health.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good rule of thumb in all things,
Yeah.
especially these days. Yeah, I also have a full-time day job, so it proves difficult. Like sometimes there are days when like after I have dinner, I'm just like I am too tired to like do this today. I just don't have the energy. Like I want to, but I'm just
Mhm.
there's
Yeah.
only so much I think sometimes that like you can do. And one
Yeah.
thing I did discover this year too was that like I need to make sure I factor in enough time for me to consume other narratives that help feed my creative spirit, right? And
Okay. Yeah,
that
nice.
like we all start usually as readers, right? And I was
Yeah.
finding that between my day job and writing, I wasn't reading as much because I just didn't
Yeah.
as much time. I wasn't prioritizing it. I'm also somebody who gets a lot of inspiration too from like movies, television, like
Mhm.
I also read graphic novels. I mean, so like I'm just like I'm a story hoe. Like I love me a good
Yes, me
story,
too.
right? Like anytime that
Yeah.
and I just realized, oh, this is actually really important to feeding my creative spirit as I've got to consume
Agreed.
because yeah, that's often where I will get the kernel of an idea for something, where it's like, oh, this cool thing, but what if we did it different? What if it
Mhm.
was this, or what if we combined, and so things like that will often kind of inspire me. What types of things sort of inspire you? Like, how do you get ideas for your writing?
A lot of ideas come from previous books. There'll be a side character. I'm not the only author whose side character has been like, "Hey, I'm gonna get my own book." So a
Yeah.
lot of it comes from side characters that leads off
Hmm.
into something else. But I also get a lot of inspiration from conversations that
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
having with other people. Somebody will say something like, "Oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting
Mhm.
concept or
Yeah.
an interesting topic." Or it might even be just like a sentence or a story that somebody's telling me. And I'm like, that is going to go in a book one day because it's hilarious.
Right.
Um, yeah, so I get a lot from just everyday conversations with my parents, with my friends, with
Mhm.
my sisters.
That's really cool. Yeah. I love to brainstorm by talking. So like I have a really good friend who's like a sometimes alpha reader for me. We've known each other. We actually bonded over our love for romance when we were in grad school, and we have similar interests in that regard. And so I think we share a brain a little bit. So she gets me, and so like when we have like brainstorming discussions together, it's always like a riot, like wild stuff happens and ideas are flowing, and I love that. But I'm a little less introverted than some authors, so I get a lot out of having more dialogue.
Okay. Yep.
I think with people to kind of help in my process. But speaking of process, can you tell me a bit about your writing process? How do you kind of go from an idea to eventually writing a novel? How does that typically work for you?
There are a few things that I need to know before I start writing a book.
Mm,
I need to know like their background, their backstory, their emotional wounds, primarily what happened in their past,
mm,
and how that wound affects them in the present day,
yeah,
and what they believe because of that wound about themselves, what do they believe about
yeah,
themselves because of that wound that will get in the way of getting what they want, whatever their goal is in the story, their belief, whatever it happens to be, how is that going to get away in the way of them wanting whatever it is that they want? So there's a
yeah,
few, those are the things really that I need to know before I start writing a story,
yeah.
for both my characters. And then I use a process called the plot embryo.
Hmm.
And somebody invented it, and I can't remember who it was, but I learned it from Rachel Steven, and she's on YouTube.
Hmm.
She's hilarious, and she has examples of how to use the plot embryo, where she'll take a movie, a bad movie, and she'll replot it using this plot embryo. And the plot embryo isn't meant to plot out every single chapter and every single scene. It's meant to give me as a writer a bigger picture, like taking a step back, looking at the overall picture. So I'm looking at, like, for example, who they are, what they want, what they're going to do to get that. And then more importantly, what's all the stuff, all the fun stuff in the middle of the book that's going to get in the way of what they want, all those obstacles. Um, that sort of really helps me figure out where the book is going to go. And if I get
Hmm.
stuck somewhere along the way while I'm writing and I'm like, I don't know what happens next, crap, I
Yeah.
can refer to this plot and reel that I've already done and see if I've written,
Hmm.
um, XYZ could happen to help teach this character whatever.
Oh,
So I
interesting.
use this plot embryo method that really helps me.
Oh, very cool. I've never heard of that one before. So this is one of the many reasons I
Yeah,
love talking with other authors. Like I always learn something new, and that's something that I enjoy anyway.
yeah. Oh,
Um,
good.
so that's really cool. I mean, so when you use this process, are you somebody who's primarily typing? Do you like use Word or something different? I've met a few people who do like longhand first and then they type. I do dictation primarily for the first draft.
Okay.
So everyone's a little bit different, but kind of what do you do for that?
For like the actual writing itself,
Yeah.
I use Scrivener.
Oh,
So I
Scrivener.
remember I am typing. Yeah, I used to use Word, and then I just remember like having to scroll through the whole thing if I was looking for one thing. And then I remember discovering Scrivener, and you can like chop it up into little bits. I'm like, this is
Right.
brilliant. So yeah, I'm in Scrivener now.
Yeah, yeah, no, I know there are quite a few people who like Scrivener. Okay, that's really
Yeah.
cool. Now do you have beta readers? So once you've got a draft, like how do you kind of go about the editing and revising process?
I first start with me. Usually, as I'm writing, I'll think of something that needs to go into the book, but
Yeah.
it's one of those things that like I can't just plop it in here. I have to go back and pepper it in.
Mm,
As I'm writing, I won't always go back and pepper it in. I'll just start writing as if I've already done that. And then once I'm finished the book, I'll go back to the beginning and fix whatever needs fixing. So it starts with me and fixing those little plot holes and plot points that need
sure.
to be fixed as I'm going along. I have alpha readers who are amazing. I'm in a Discord group with three other authors, and we alpha read each other's stuff as we
Wow.
go, which
Yeah.
is really nice. And then I do have beta readers as well, so I've got those. And then once all that feedback has been taken in, I've updated the draft and made it as nice and polished as I can. It goes to my developmental editor. And so
Mm,
she'll give it a read and she'll tell me what works and what doesn't, why
mm,
it doesn't,
yeah.
and how I could possibly make it better, the story itself. So she's really
Mm,
looking at it from a story angle, not
yeah.
copy editing. It's story. What's not working? What is working? How can you fix it? And here's some idea. She always comes with ideas, which is nice.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sitting there going, okay, how do I fix this issue that I've made for myself now? She'll always have some ideas. Um, so it goes to her, and then I will take her feedback and I will either apply it or I won't. It's not a
Mm,
magic button, and ultimately it's my book. So
yeah.
sometimes she'll give me some feedback and say, hey, I really think this aspect of the book would work better if you did this instead. And I might sit back and say, no, because that's not the type of story I want to tell.
Sure.
And so either I take her feedback or I don't, but I always make updates to my manuscript once I hear back from her because I take what feedback I want and apply
Hmm.
that, and then it goes to the copy editor, and then it goes to the proofreader, and then the arcs get sent out, and then I release the book.
Yeah, okay. So, do you have kind of like a set schedule for releases? Like how many do you tend to do in a year? Do you plot that out like a year in advance, or do you just kind of do it based on what works for your personal schedule?
I used to plot it out a year in advance, where I
Mm,
would sort of look at where I am and I'd say it takes me X amount of months to write this book
yeah.
of this length, which means I'm going to be finished by this date, which means I'll be ready for copy editing here.
Hmm.
And the reason I would do that is because my copy editor books up ahead of time
Oh,
and she's great.
yeah.
So I try to get in with her ahead of time. But
Yeah.
lately, I've been finding that books have been taking me a little bit longer to write because I have a puppy at home and he takes a lot of my time.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
haven't had a lot as much time to write these days as I have. So it's taking me longer to write, which means I've been pushing editing dates back. So where I could previously say I'm going to have a release this month, and this month, now it's more like I'm going to have a release this month, and then we'll see what happens after that.
Right.
So I'm sort of taking it one book at a time now.
Oh, yes, I can relate.
Yeah.
I well, so like I don't know if you do Clifton Strengths at all, but like my number one is futuristic. So
Oh,
I
okay.
think really far out. So like when I'm thinking, I'm not thinking like a month ahead. I'm thinking like 5 years ahead, right? And so
Oh,
like I have ideas for like, oh, these are the series that are gonna happen, that kind of thing.
yeah.
But sometimes I get a little I overestimate like reality in terms of like what I can achieve and the fact that like
Yeah.
sometimes life happens and
Yeah.
you can't always meet
Yeah.
deadlines if you don't give yourself any buffer. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, so I had a learning experience with that this year when I had to cancel a pre-order, which was really hard for me. But, I just, the year before I was just cranking stuff out really fast. And then this year,
Mhm.
it was just taking me longer to do
Yep.
stuff because of a whole lot of different factors, right? That I hadn't really, I think, considered my impact things. So, like, now I've got a very different, much more flexible plan going into 2025 to
Mhm.
kind of try to address that. So, that's
That's a good
definitely
idea.
something for, new people or aspiring authors to really think about. It's easy to get
Yeah.
yourself like trapped.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you do, and you don't want to let your readers down. Like that's the worst thing ever.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, but it's all about being able to actually continue doing this and enjoy doing
Yeah.
it, which I think if you push yourself too hard to do too much, it can all crumble and fall apart.
Totally. Yeah. I
And
had a book. I had a book that I was supposed to release earlier this year that I had to cancel. I stopped writing it halfway through because A, at the time it wasn't the book I needed to be writing. I just wasn't in the right headspace. And
Ah.
then B, I had the puppy. I got the puppy in January and he took over my life for like 2 months. It was
They do.
terrible. I keep telling people don't ever get a puppy, they're the worst. But it just
You,
turned out that,
you,
oh my
you.
God. Hi,
This is
Kitty.
one of my this is Teddy with his little
Hi, Teddy.
and Snaggletooth. He's the one who's been making
Teddy.
all the noise, and he's a chocolate Yorkie.
Oh, he's
Um,
so cute.
and then my other boy, I don't know if he'll come up. Do you want to come up, Jasper? Oh, yes. Okay. This is Jasper. He's
Hi,
he's
Jasper.
he's also a Yorkie. Hey,
Yes.
buddy. Um,
Hi.
I'll let you go. Tell me about your puppy. What kind is it, and what is his or her name?
He's a toy Shih Tzu named Finley. So he's just a little guy, toy breed. He's 9 pounds. He's not here right now. Otherwise, I would do a little show and tell. My
Oh,
sister brought him to the studio where she teaches.
oh, cute.
Um, yeah, little 9 pound toy Shih Tzu. His name is Finley. He's black and brown, super cute, but he's still a puppy. He's 11 and a half months. He's going to be a
Oh,
year
yeah.
old on November 27th. So,
Oh,
still some training to be done. He's
yeah.
he has some really good moments and then some moments where he just sits there and barks at you for half an hour, which is super fun.
Yeah.
So, but when I first got him, it was really, really hard. And like I said, I tell people all the time, don't get a puppy. They're the worst.
Yeah.
And the first couple of months that he was here, I was meant to be writing, but I could not find the energy to
No.
write when there was this rambunctious puppy in the house, and I had to stop writing about halfway through a book, and I set it
Yeah.
aside, and I was like, maybe I'll get to it another day, a few years down the line, maybe. I couldn't.
I mean, totally understandable. I raised both of my dogs from puppies, and like the first 6 months, it's just,
Yeah,
your sleep is disrupted, especially for the first
yeah,
couple of months because they
yeah,
can't go the whole night, especially the
yeah.
small breeds because they're just
Hmm.
bigger dogs, apparently. Like the potty training process often faster, and then they can go through the night a
Yes,
lot longer just
that
because they've
too.
got bigger bladders, right? But
Yeah,
like the little tiny guys, like
yeah.
Jasper, he's full grown and he's only 7.5 pounds, right? And so like
Okay, little guy. Yep.
little guy. But yeah, so like it takes them longer and just,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, and the
Yeah.
energy that they have and
Yes.
try to help. Yeah, yeah.
Like just
It's
sit there.
exhausting. I mean, it's worth it in the long run. Like I think I
Yeah.
would be like in a very bad mental headspace if I didn't have my dogs, to be honest. Like
Yeah.
they help me get through the loneliness of like lockdown during the pandemic and like
Yeah.
all the things like the most recent
I
election,
believe.
like
Yeah.
they help my mental health so much, right? Um, yeah, and that unconditional love is just
Mhm.
it's truly amazing. It really is. But I want to kind of shift gears a little bit and talk a bit. I mean, this is a dog segue because I want to talk about your upcoming release, your Christmas Falls romance. It's called Christmas
Yeah.
Bow. And the minute I saw Dog Dads, I was like sold. I was so tell me a little bit about your upcoming book and kind of what where you got inspiration for it.
Sure. So yeah, Christmas Boat comes out on the 29th of November. It's part of the Christmas Falls season 2 series, a multi-author series. We did season 1 last year. And then we're doing season 2 this holiday, and we have some returning authors who wrote in season 1 last year and some new authors. And so
Mm.
Christmas Boat is the sixth book that's going to be releasing this year. The books can be read in any order. This is just the sixth one that's coming out. And the inspiration for that came from actually last year's book that I wrote in the Christmas Fall series. It's called Get Frosted. And when yeah,
Love that.
it's a lot of fun. It's a fun book. It's rivals to lovers, so and brother's best friend. So that one's a lot of fun. But
Mm.
in Get Frosted, So when I was thinking about this year's book, like, as an author, when you're tying in books and series, you want to introduce characters in your next book that your readers already know and might already be
Of
emotionally invested
course.
in.
Yeah, yeah.
And when I started sort of brainstorming for Christmas Bow, I was a little bit stuck because I was trying to figure out, do I introduce new characters or do I use characters that I had introduced in Get Frosted?
Yeah.
And the reason it was tricky to introduce characters from Get Frosted was that a lot of my side characters were already coupled up.
Oh, sure.
And I was like, oh shoot, who am I going to use now? But in that book, I did introduce both characters that are in Christmas
Oh,
Bow. One of them had one scene, one very short scene with
yeah.
one of my MCs, and the other one is mentioned. You don't actually meet him on page, but he's
Mm,
mentioned. And
yeah.
so my mind went to, okay, I could use one of these characters for this
Right.
year's Christmas Falls book.
Bada boom, bada bing.
Hey, hey, I can use both characters. They can be each other's love interests. That's
Yeah.
where that sort of came from. And because I had introduced them in Get Frosted, they already had jobs because
Yeah.
that's, or one of them did because it's mentioned in the book. The other
Mm,
one, it's mentioned he's a single dad. So that was already, so there were a few things that were already established about them that I could use in this
right.
year's book. And from there, I just sort of did some brainstorming, like who are these characters? What do
Yeah.
they bring to the table? I don't even know where the dogs come from. They both have dogs. One of them has one dog, the other one has three dogs.
I love it.
And I don't remember where that came from. I just thought it would be fun to have characters go on doggy play dates and see where that
Right.
leads romantically.
Hmm.
That's where the dogs came from.
Yeah, I mean, like the potential. So I tend to write a lot of comedy. So, like, but stuff like that, like, immediately I'm like, oh, the potential for all kinds of comedic shenanigans with doggy play dates, very high,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And like cuteness overload, right?
Yes,
But
the
yeah, I mean,
cuteness for sure.
I'm definitely one of those like readers who like I'm a sucker for there's a cute animal in the
Hmm.
story. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
there, right?
Me too.
Uh, I love that. So now the series itself, like, because I know it's like multi-author, right? Like who is running that? Are you like in charge of the series or is it somebody else? Like how did you get involved?
Not me. Fearless Leader is DJ Jameson. So she
Oh,
invited me to participate in last year's
yeah.
Christmas
Okay.
Falls series way at
Yeah.
the beginning of last year. And then at the beginning of this year, she was like, hey, who wants to do a season two? Let's do a season two.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and it was totally optional. So some of the authors who did season one last year are not doing season two. So we've got some
Sure.
new authors in the mix. So yeah,
Hmm.
she had invited me to participate, and I had always wanted to do a multi-author series, but never got invited to one before. So when I got invited, I was like, yes, yes, I'm
Yeah.
going places.
Right. Well, and I mean, I think for so many authors, it's very smart business sense to have
Mhm.
holiday book that you're going to do each year.
Yeah.
Whether it's a novel or a novella or even like a short story, there's a
Mhm.
whole submarket for it.
Oh, 100%.
And they often tend to sell a lot better than other stuff once you start getting into like November, December
Yeah,
time of year. So, yeah, that's
there's
definitely
so
something
many of
I
them.
learned along the way. So now I
Yeah.
try to do that as well. Um, can you tell me a little bit about sort of, so you already kind of knew a little bit about who these characters were. Um, are there any secondary characters in the book that you'd like to explore, maybe in Christmas book 3 in the future? So like were you thinking ahead? Because like,
Um,
you mentioned like the side character thing, right? Which
yes.
I think like so many of us, like
Yeah.
that's why I can't write standalones, is because I have a very bad habit of like, I call it creating side characters who have main character energy.
Yeah.
Where you're
Yes.
like,
Yeah. That makes a lot
and
of sense.
the readers are
That's
like,
so
where's their
underrated.
story? You're gonna write this, right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, and there's like 5 of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so like, did you find like writing this, you were thinking ahead to like maybe a third book, and I've got a potential character that I want to flesh out more?
Not really, actually, with this
Hmm.
one, which is rare. So one of my main characters has a brother in the book who has a little bit of a storyline, but that
Mm,
wouldn't work for a third book for reasons I don't want to spoil. So I'm not going to mention why, but that wouldn't work either. And then my other main character has four brothers,
mm.
all older. Sorry, three brothers, three older brothers.
Okay.
Um, and one of them is not straight. And there is a little bit of a story there with his partner that
Mm.
I didn't mean to be a thing. It just sort of like, I don't know if it happens to you where you just sort of you'll write something and be like, oh, that's a good idea for something.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and there's some in it gets resolved in the epilogue of the book, but the epilogue
Mm.
is 5 years later.
Oh,
So there's room there
yeah.
if I ever wanted to write that story. Because as I was writing it in this book, I was like, ooh, that's interesting. Why is this happening to this character
Very cool.
with his
Yeah.
partner? So potentially there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I never go in initially intending that the side characters
Um,
will have to have their own story. It's more like I think part of it is I love the found family kind of trope. And
mm, yeah.
I feel like, really well-rounded characters need to have their own support systems, like people
Yeah.
they trust. I mean, that's at least how I operate, right? I've got my
Mhm.
tight group of like friends. Some of them I've been friends with for 30 plus years, stuff like that. And so, it always, to me, it's like, whether it's a biological family member or it's like people they work with or people in their building, their whatever the case may be, right, that they have this network of people and they just always end up being so
Yes.
interesting, and I'm like, well, gosh
Yeah.
darn it, and I'm like, I
I
want to read
relate.
the story now too, but
Yeah.
gosh darn it, I have to be the one to write it.
Yeah.
Because
Oh
that's the
man.
tricky part, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
I get a lot
yeah.
whenever I talk to non-writers who are like asking me about what it's like to be a writer. They're always like, "But where'd you get your ideas?" I'm like, "It's not hard when you're writing a character who has all this support network of people, and then you just want to write their story. So there's no shortage of ideas." And nobody who's not a writer believes me. They're like, "No, no, it must be so hard to come up with ideas." I'm like, "It's really not."
Right. Yeah. I think it would be really fascinating. I wonder if they've ever done any kind of like brain research or stuff on people who are creatives, whether they're writers or artists or whatever,
Maybe.
in terms of like what happens in the brain when we're in the midst of the
Mhm.
creative process and stuff like
Oh,
that.
good.
Because like you, I wanted to be a writer from a really early age. I loved stories. That was my favorite thing to be read to read. And like, I developed a habit like very early in childhood. Like we're talking maybe kindergarten, first grade, where I would literally, when I'm going to bed, invent stories in my brain, like, and that would put me to sleep. Like I'd just start imagining, many of the early childhood ones involved me, like going on adventures or doing cool
Yeah.
things, right? But they would evolve over time, often inspired by things that I had read. And I still, when I'm having trouble falling asleep, my default is almost always go to imagine an interesting story scenario, right?
Same.
And
Same.
some of those end up becoming actual fodder for things that I write down the line or things I want to write someday. But yeah, I guess maybe not everybody does that kind of thing. But for me,
Yeah.
it's always very inherent
Me too.
to how my brain works. And I
Yeah.
mean,
Same.
I
And
think that,
sometimes
yeah,
I was just gonna say, sometimes as I'm trying to fall asleep, I'm thinking of the book I'm writing, and in my head, I write out what happens next, and then I'm like,
yeah,
I'm gonna wake up in the morning and forget all this, so I gotta turn the light on, get my
yeah,
phone out, start typing it out, so it's there tomorrow morning when
yes,
I get to writing
yes.
again.
Oh my God, I have so many weird voice memos to myself in the middle of
Yeah,
the night. Like, oh, remember this thing, right?
yeah.
And
That's what
sometimes,
I
like,
should doing. I should start doing that. Just recording a voice memo would
yes,
take way less time than actually
it
typing it
does.
out.
Yeah, that's how I do it because like otherwise I'm usually too sleepy and like I can do it faster with a voice memo so I'm not
Yeah.
forgetting anything as well. And I do that like I keep my phone with me everywhere because I'll get ideas at the weirdest
Yeah.
times, right? Um the annoying one is I often get them in the shower, right?
Me too.
It's like
Yes, same.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like, well, fuck, I can't get my can't get my
Yeah.
phone right now, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, and I'm like scrubbing real fast, and I'm like, try to remember,
Yes.
don't forget,
Yeah. There's something about water because if I'm
yeah,
stuck on a story, there's a pool here in my backyard. So in the summer when it's open, if I'm stuck on a story, I'll just go for like a 10-minute swim and I'm not even swimming. I'm literally just sitting there on like a pool floaty or
yeah,
a noodle, and for some reason the story works itself out in my head. Something about water, I don't know.
yeah. I mean, I think like I feel like it's kind of water, but also partly the combination of like you're not doing anything that requires a great deal of mental thought. So it kind of
Yeah.
like it's almost like a meditation, right? And that's when all the ideas start flooding into my
Yeah.
brain. I'll be like, la la la, shampoo my hair, and then boom, idea. And you're
Yeah.
like, I started.
Yeah.
So I sometimes share those like not too long ago I shared one in my reader group and I was like, okay guys, I had this really wild and crazy idea. Like, do you think it could work? And like they loved it. Like they were just like, this is amazing. And
Nice.
it's like, okay, all right, good. So, but like, because sometimes they're off the wall ideas that I'll get in the middle of like, yeah, doing that kind of thing or washing the dishes sometimes. Again, something where it
Yeah.
doesn't require a lot of thought. So my brain kind of clears and then boom, I'm hit
Yeah.
with all kinds of stuff. So yeah. Um, well, I'm always really interested not only in what authors write, but what they read. So, do you tend to read uh primarily in the categories that you write? Do you read in any areas that you don't actually write in?
Primarily I read romance, but
Yeah.
I
Okay.
will branch out into YA fantasy
Hmm.
and romantasy, and I also will occasionally pick up, I don't know how to classify it, maybe general fiction, but you know those books with like a dual timeline? So like there's a story that happens in the past and then one that
Oh,
happens in the present, and then as you get near
yeah.
the end, you find out how they're related. I
Hmm.
love those too. I
Interesting.
don't read them as often, only because the books are really chunky and it takes a while to get through them. So I don't read them as often, but I do enjoy those every so often too.
So in MM, you primarily write contemporary and kind of sports. Do
Yeah.
you read other subgenres in MM?
I read most subgenres. I love
Oh,
paranormal. I love fantasy.
hmm.
Thrillers are fun. The occasional sci-fi, anything. I'll read pretty much anything.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Um, so in addition to sort of reading in your free time, what other types of, do you have any other kinds of hobbies or things that you like to do?
Right now I'm in Hallmark movie watching mode because all the Christmas movies are coming out, so that's what I'm doing right
Right.
now. Um, I mean, I think I would say writing is and reading are my biggest hobbies, although writing is more of a business. But it's still a
Right.
hobby.
Yeah.
Hanging out with my dog, hanging out with my sisters, with my friends, and
Yeah.
just catching a good movie. And I love musical theater. I go see plays a
Cool.
lot.
Oh, cool. Oh, very neat. Um, yeah, because I'm always really interested in talking with other writers, and I've found that I'm maybe a little unusual in the genre, well, in just romance in general, in the sense that, I am single, I am not married, never been married, I am child-free by choice, and I really love my life doing this, and it sort of allows me actually, I feel like, to have the time and the energy to pursue the kind of stuff that I want to do. Especially like I certainly have a number of, friends who had to kind of put aside some of their creative interests once they got married and had children and other stuff like that because they just didn't have the time or the energy for it anymore. So it was really
Sure.
interesting for me to kind of see that you're in perhaps a slightly similar kind of
Yeah.
situation. And is there anything you can sort of say about like how you feel like this kind of helps you as a writer?
I mean, you're right in the sense that it definitely gives more time. I mean, there's the dog who's basically my child.
Right.
Um,
Me
but
too.
right, but I don't have kids, so I don't have kids to cook for,
Yeah.
or a partner. So it is just me. So I have time to sort of pursue the things that I want to be pursuing right now. I
Mhm.
have the time to travel if I want to. And I
Yes.
love traveling, so I can pretty much do that whenever I feel like it, and not have to worry about, leaving the kids behind or figuring out how to take the kids or whatever with me. But yeah, like you, childless by choice. Got the
Hmm.
dog, like I said, he's my kid. One of my sisters has a couple of kids, two kids. I've got a niece who's 7 and my nephew is 3.5, and I love them to death. I would do anything for them. But then, like, my sister's tired all the time because, of
Yeah.
course, they're a handful. One's in school, one's in daycare. And there's picking up after the kids, and there's making lunches for the next day and dinners.
Yeah.
And she and her husband both work full time too.
Yeah.
And I see how it limits, nothing against having kids or and
Oh
being married
no.
or anybody watching, but I see how it sort of limits
Mhm.
like her energy levels and the desire
Sure.
to sort of do something else. Um, but yeah, for me, honestly, it just means I get to sort of enjoy the things that I'm enjoying right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's important to kind of normalize that more for other
Yeah,
people, for younger writers coming up. Like, I know that particularly as women in a patriarchal culture, there's often a lot more pressure to do these kinds of
yeah,
things. But if that's not the path for you, it can be equally rewarding
yeah,
to
for
go
sure.
another route. I don't have anything against marriage or kids either. They're just not for me. I'm the oldest of 6 children, and I
Okay.
have a couple of very much younger, like 13 years younger than me, and I spent a lot of time when I was young helping take care of
Okay.
little kids. And so like I
Yeah.
know all that's involved in it. And I was sort of like,
Yeah.
you know, I have an anxiety disorder. I have some issues. I'm like, I feel like in part also, I just don't think I would have what I would need to give to being a parent to a child.
Fair enough.
A
Yeah.
dog I can do or two,
Yeah.
like, but
Yeah.
no, not three. I've told myself you can't get another one, but
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I think yeah, and like also I also love to travel and it's so
Mhm.
much harder when you're dealing with a spouse and children and all of the kind of stuff that
Yeah.
just make it really really difficult
Yeah.
and I know in our genre too like I've certainly seen some instances in which, in particular, like certain heterosexual relationships, sometimes male partners are not always supportive of their wives
Yeah.
writing a romance, right? And I've seen sort of some of the like behind the scenes like stuff that's gone on with some of that for some people, and it's really sad because it's like you'd want a partner to be your biggest cheerleader,
Yeah.
right? For something
Yeah.
like this. But yeah, so I think it's really cool. I think that, it would be great to have like more conversations about kind of the diversity of experiences within the genre. Because not everyone is the same. And I think we all bring something unique and vibrant to the discourse about all of this. Um But I know
I
we're,
sometimes,
yeah, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, I sometimes get questions from like my grandpa. My grandpa's 97, and he'll ask me why I'm not dating, or like my dad will ask. And like
Mm.
you were talking about Clifton strengths earlier, my number one is relator, which
Oh.
surprised me because I was like, I don't like people. And my coach was like, but it's not about liking people, it's about
Mm.
wanting to have meaningful interactions and meaningful connection. And
Yeah.
so with other people. So the
Yep.
idea for me of like making small talk, I would rather do anything else.
Yeah.
Literally anything else. The idea of dating and making small talk with some random person, like, nope, nope, no thanks.
Right.
Maybe one day, but sorry now. Shut the door on
No,
that.
yeah. I completely relate to that. I mean, I think part of it is also I never get bored and I never get lonely, right? Like I
Oh,
have partly maybe just because I have the kind of creative brain, I can entertain myself forever,
yeah,
right?
me
Like
too.
always. So it's kind of like for other people to be in my life, they have to be contributing something that makes it even better, right?
Mhm.
They and so I just, I think over maybe I'm highly picky and highly selective, but I haven't
Me too.
found people that like can give enough in that regard that I would want to
Mhm.
sacrifice some of my time, my freedom, like all of that kind of stuff. And I'm
Yeah,
still blissfully happy the way that I am. And I think that I think we're seeing more people who are going that route as well and finding it very, very fulfilling. So
yeah.
it's
No, yeah, there are definitely only certain people in my life that I would give up some of my
yes.
hard-earned free time for.
Exactly. Yeah, because we are busy people when between the full-time job and the second job, right? And all the stuff
Yeah.
we've got to do to support that, because it's not just the writing, it is the
Nope.
marketing, it is the
Yep.
promotion, it is the going to events, it is the reader groups,
Yep.
it is newsletter, it's like
Mhm.
so much, it's sometimes kind of overwhelming.
Yeah.
So I know I'm like I'm also much more picky about these kinds of things. And it's
Yeah.
that's also kind of one of the reasons like I like doing this show is because sometimes writing can be very insular and I love to like find ways to meet other authors in the genre, to learn from them, to dialogue, and to also help promote work because I feel like our genre is one in which by and large, we are an incredibly inclusive, supportive group of people who really are here to try to uplift each other. And that's certainly one of my objectives. But it's one of the things that I love about being part of queer romance. So, yeah.
Me too.
Well, we are just about out of time, and I want to respect that here because I know you're a busy person as well. Um, Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. I always like to kind of wrap up at the end by asking if you can give my listeners, some of whom might be your readers, any kind of little hints or clues about what you have coming maybe in 2025.
I can. So, the next book comes out November 29th. That's Christmas
Yep.
Bow. And then I'm working on another shared world series that I can't
Ooh.
talk too much about in terms of what it's about because it hasn't been publicly announced yet, but it's another shared world series with some other fantastic authors. It's meant to be a low angst series. There are 10, I believe, 10 or 12 authors participating in this shared world series. So I'll be starting work on that book like tomorrow, probably. I'll start writing. Um, that's what's coming up next for me. That release is going to be in May.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, the part of the shared world series. And then after that is when I plan on working on a new hockey romance trilogy. So that'll be
Oh,
fun. The hockey romance trilogy is going to be a spin-off from the Vancouver Orcas trilogy.
okay. So will it
Yep.
also be set in Vancouver or somewhere else?
No, somewhere
Ooh.
else. Yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah,
okay.
we're traveling.
Interesting. Well, I'd love to see one in Montreal someday. I love
Maybe,
Montreal. Montreal is fun.
maybe. It's not Montreal. Not Montreal, but it could be one day.
Right, right. Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Well, that I think that's a lot of you sounds like you've got a lot of fun stuff for readers
Yeah,
to look forward
I'm
to.
excited.
Yes, Amy, thank you so much for talking with me today. And to all of my listeners and viewers, I will see you all again next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for having me.